A while back I made a video about a couple of fighting game characters who were the recipients of buffs that dramatically improved their viability in the meta of their respective games. It was a fun little project, but in that video I alluded to the prospect of making a similar video where I discussed the opposite. Today, I thought it would be fun to finally do that. Seeing your character get hit with a literal TV episode script's worth of nerfs might be the worst feeling in the entire world. Little slaps on the wrist can feel like daggers through the chest in the heat of the moment, but I'd like to talk about some absolutely diabolical instances where characters who may or may not have deserved it got absolutely eviscerated by the balance team behind the madness. Gonna be fun and also possibly painful, so let's jump right into it. If anyone makes a video on this topic and doesn't discuss Sean and Street Fighter 3, the world might actually implode. So here we are. By this point, in 2026, anyone watching this video is probably already familiar with Sean in Third Strike, but honestly, despite how widespread knowledge of his low-tier status is, there's still something very fascinating about it. Sean was intended to be a successor to both Shotos, and Ken in particular moveset-wise, so he has a very similarly designed kit and identical animations. New Generation's producer has said in an interview that Sean was meant to be a character that experienced players could use to handicap themselves against people who were newer to the game. Sean, in his original incarnation, is a failed product of this ideology, because this character is cracked. The crux of Second Impact Sean's strength is his meter build and his ability to threaten huge damage via a hit confirm into his supers, particularly Super 3, Hyper Tornado. This baby is a zero-frame super, it stocks 2 meters and does tons of damage and stun, and Sean can confirm off it off a ton of things. Close heavy kick, close medium punch and the accompanying medium punch heavy kick target combo, far standing medium punch, both jabs, all versions of his Tatsu besides light, his wheel kick, his universal overhead. SA3 can be linked from all of these things, with phenomenal damage and stun as the reward. A high damage super can make a character in the SF3 engine, since punishes are so strong and frequent due to parrying, and this is a clear case of that as Sean gets big returns from Hyper Tornado, making it one of the best supers in Second Impact. Thanks to a bug that builds extra meter when a direction is held while pressing standing medium punch and standing heavy punch, his meter build is elite. He pretty much always has at least one bar on deck. On top of that, Sean has really good movement and a super versatile set of buttons. You have fast jabs, a godlike close standing heavy kick, a pretty good crouching medium kick, basically every kind of button you'd want a Shoto to have, and remember, a lot of these buttons can be hit confirmed into SA3. He wasn't quite top 1, I have seen that misconception before, and he's really good, but not to the level of Akuma, the Twins, or Ibuki. Still, he was undeniably a top cut contender. Unfortunately, a contender is not what Capcom wanted Sean to be, and so we get to Third Strike, which cuts down Sean's kit in numerous ways. The biggest nerfs were to his extremely strong SA3. Super 3 still does mad damage, but it has slightly slower startup, and more harmfully, the meter build bug is gone. On top of that, Sean's Super 3 in Third Strike was altered to only have 1 bar instead of 2, which is a very big blow even without taking into account the worse meter gain. Not only does it obviously mean less uses of the super itself, but it heavily cuts down his EX usage to only 3 for 1 bar. Third Strike Sean can still do huge damage with an SA3 confirm, but this is not practical at all anymore because it only stocks 1 bar, which is a lot more glaring when you realize that one of the new additions to Third Strike was a character who has a game plan centered around extremely strong meter build and exploitation of said meter build through hit confirming into a 2-bar super for huge damage, and she happens to be top tier as hell. SA1 and SA2 being 3 bars and 2 respectively remains unchanged between Second Impact and Third Strike, but those just don't lead to the same damage that Sean used to get from SA3. Beyond this, Third Strike also killed much of Sean's crazy frame data, especially on his normals. A lot of the ones that were insanely plus on hit in Second Impact were toned down in Third Strike. Close standing heavy kick, just as an example, was plus 7 on hit in Second Impact and got shot down to being plus 4 in Third Strike. Sean's specials were also heavily nerfed between games. His DP used to do this cool little slam in Second Impact, which gave it overall better range. Third Strike made it travel more vertically and removed the slam, presumably storing it away in cryostasis until Luke stole it 20 years later. His Tatsu was notably really good in Second Impact. Like I mentioned, all versions other than Light could be linked into Super, which is quite strong. EX Tornado in Second Impact is particularly nasty thanks to a combination of pretty fast startup, safety on block, and the fact that it can combo out of most of his normals. It was really good, so naturally it got hit pretty hard in Third Strike. Sean's Third Strike Tatsu is wildly unsafe on block, and even on hit, every version is disadvantageous. EX was previously a reliable gateway into Super, but not only is that no longer the case in Third Strike, but even if it was, SA3 being only one bar means you wouldn't even be able to do EX Tatsu into Super anyway. A cruel joke. Part of the reason his Tatsus have such bad advantage in Third Strike is because that game removed his ability to crouch cancel them for better recovery in Second Impact. His wheel kick interestingly got something of a positive change in Third Strike. In Second Impact, Sean hopping up so high made it quite easy to reaction parry, so the reduction in travel height for the Third Strike version is genuinely good for him. However, it also had its frame data butchered. Literally, it went from being able to link into Super to being minus on hit. Finally, Sean saw sweeping changes to the recovery and startup of his normals, all in service of making them slower and more unsafe. It's actually a little comical just how meticulous they were nerfing him, not just getting rid of his oppressive meter gain and supers, but also killing his buttons and specials in a fashion so over the top it's almost funny. It especially sucks because much of the changes to his normals just make them worse than very similar buttons on the other three Shotos, and with all of them being higher top tier in Third Strike and Sean being considered one of the worst characters, it's tough to justify actually playing him over them, which is quite a stark contrast to the prior game. Last month I participated in an event called Grid Break, which basically took the Sajam Slam format and adapted it for Under Night In-Birth 2. It was a great time, and one particular joy of the whole thing was getting to learn things about characters I didn't know before. Even though I would say I expanded my knowledge of the roster for the most part, one character still remained an enigma to me. Chaos. Other than being a puppet character, I was almost completely clueless on this guy. He's pretty rare to run into on Ranked, and I hadn't seen much of him in tournament prior to researching for this video. I only knew one thing about Chaos going into this, besides the fact he's a puppet character, and that's the fact he's low tier in Uni 2. Now I'm hardly knowledgeable on the meta of Uni 1, but I certainly knew Chaos was no low tier, so that led me to ponder, what the hell happened between games? Chaos is, as I mentioned, a puppet character, and is thus highly dependent on his puppet Ozzy. All of his specials are done by Ozzy, and without the pup, all Chaos really has are his buttons, which are generally unremarkable range-wise, outside of his projectile reflecting 6C. Unlike other puppet characters like Zato or Carl, Chaos doesn't get any real high-low mix, but he does have very strong presence at the mid to long range. 236X does a series of claw swipes and 214X shoots fireballs, and both are strong options to control space. The swipe allows for combo conversions, and the fireballs are a strong zoning tool since they travel downward at an angle that makes it tricky to get in. Chaos can fire 2 projectiles by doing increased 214A/B. Chaos's specials can be cancelled into each other to create long pressure sequences and combos. Chaos also has the unique ability to cancel his specials into normals if they connect on hit or block. This special to normal reverse beating is one of his strongest features, because they often leave him very plus. He can also combo off his throw with 22X. With all these different ways to be plus and to pressure or frame trap from close and afar, Chaos is super strong on offense. 6C warrants greater mention too. I already brought up that it reflects projectiles, and it synergizes very well with his long-ranged Ozzy pressure. It catches many forward-moving options like dashes, jumps, and assault, and it's a good way to protect Ozzy as a result. Plus, it's a staple tool in his routing, with his roll allowing him to convert it from afar. Chaos's ability to win is hinged entirely on Ozzy's presence, and unfortunately for the guy, some of the worst nerfs he got between CLR, the last version of Uni 1, and Uni 2 prey upon this dependency. Whenever Ozzy is active, he can be taken out with a single hit, which disappears him for 3 seconds. As far as buttons go, Uni 1 Ozzy can only be killed by B and C normals, so depending on the character and what range Chaos had Ozzy positioned, it could be a bit risky to try and take him out. In Uni 2, Ozzy is now vulnerable to A normals, allowing the opponent to jab him away with their fastest button, practically no risk involved. Chaos' specials all utilize Ozzy, so losing him is obviously a tremendous handicap, one that this change now forces Chaos to endure much more frequently than before. On top of this, Uni 2 took away the projectile invulnerability Ozzy once had on the startup of Chaos' specials. Ozzy now dies to projectiles at any point during his attacks. They did slightly compensate by having him absorb them instead of the projectile passing through him, but it still sucks. Chaos historically had strong anti-zoning thanks to Ozzy being able to blow through projectiles, and with stuff like 236C, it was highly rewarding for him to do so. You can't exactly anti-zone when your anti-zoning tool fucking loses its anti-zoning properties. One helpful property in Uni 1 that Chaos had was that if he blocked an attack while Ozzy was on top of him, most of the time Ozzy would be protected by Chaos. With Uni 2, those kinds of interactions more commonly end with Ozzy still dying. On top of making Ozzy easier to kill, Chaos' specials were also nerfed directly. Being in Vorpal state in Uni grants various benefits for characters, and one of Chaos's was invincibility for Ozzy during 623A/B. This move was his main way of calling out Ozzy kill attempts, and in Uni 2, the invincibility this move once had was removed completely. Following in the trend of his rewards for winning the grid cycle being worsened or straight up removed, the window Chaos had to cancel his specials with chain shift was increased, so now you have to wait longer to CS his special moves. In Uni 1, all of his specials were cancelable on frame 5, besides 22X which was frame 4. In Uni 2, this window is 9 frames universally. This is a particularly nasty nerf. When CSing his specials early, Chaos can move independently while Ozzy is attacking. It was a powerful tool for Chaos in Vorpal because it let him block while Ozzy attacked, and if it successfully interrupted a button from the opponent or forced him to block, he could start his offense. At certain ranges, it was a big threat in neutral, and it would also let him interrupt many different pressure strings on defense. In Uni 2, Ozzy CS has pretty much lost all its use because of the longer cancel windows. Most situations where it worked prior will just end with Chaos getting counter hit. These changes are odd because winning Cycle consistently is quite hard for Chaos, since he has no real way to stop people from shielding Ozzy pressure and zoning at long range. He has to work for Cycle, and they made it less rewarding for him to win it. Also sucks to lose a defensive option on a character whose defense is sorely lacking. Chaos's non-Ozzy moves weren't spared the hammer. 5B got buffed with 20 damage and an expanded hitbox, but the 5BB extension that he used for frame trapping had its stagger window and travel distance reduced. 6C, that one great move I talked about, got nerfed as well. Chaos used to be able to block during the last 5 frames of the move's recovery in Uni 1, and this was taken away in Uni 2. His throw damage was also lowered. One of the more interesting series of changes was to Chaos's force function. Originally, his force function was the roll. At the start of Chaos's life, roll had invincibility to projectiles, strikes, and throws at points during the active frames. CLR removed the throw invincibility, and in Uni 2, the strike invincibility was taken away. Chaos players use this during offense to set up left-right mix with Ozzy, since the roll will cause Chaos to cross the opponent up if he's close enough. Uni 2 can still do these mix-ups, but they're much harder to enforce, as Ozzy's greater vulnerabilities and Chaos no longer having invult against strikes leaves them more liable to getting mashed out during his cross-ups, so you hardly see Chaos players go for it anymore. The strike and projectile invul let Chaos occasionally use it to slink out of the corner in Uni 1, which is no longer really possible in Uni 2. Presumably this was done to incentivize using the newly added creeping edge more, and it's functionally similar but also tremendously risky due to the possibility of getting grid broken if called out. Now Uni 2 did give him new force function moves, which are pretty good, and since the roll isn't his force function anymore, he does not have to spend grid for confirms like before, but much of the utility the roll gave Chaos on offense and defense is gone. Chaos is also hurt by the general changes to system mechanics. Defense in Uni 2 was weakened and offense was strengthened. The 1AD throw tech OS was removed, taking away a core defensive option for him. The aforementioned creeping edge gives characters a new way to circumvent his zoning and gain grid for doing so. Characters receiving faster dash speeds and meter gain, along with more ways to skip the very neutral Chaos is trying to get them to play, means Uni 2 Chaos is forced to play in a very different way. These are conditions Chaos struggles to thrive under. It's a little funny for a game that minimized or did away with conventional weaknesses for so much of the cast to double down on nerfing chaos so hard. His new force function did address his weaknesses to backdashes from Uni 1, but neither the initial patch or any of the post-launch patches Uni 2 has gotten did anything about his struggles with anti-air or his generally bad defensive options. He's not unusable or anything, and he's gotten some solid results like a Combo Breaker 2025, but undeniably much weaker. Still, there's a patch coming for Uni 2 soon, so there may be a light at the end of the tunnel. Or not. Whenever a fighting game launches, there's always bound to be at least one character who slips through the cracks and ends up being so utterly insane that discussion of their strength overtakes any other discourse around the game. Such was the case with Nier, one of 4 new characters added in Granblue Fantasy vs Rising. If you were playing this game around launch in December 2023, chances were high you heard about how busted she was. Her damage, her pressure, her reversal being fucking nuts. Didn't take long for word of mouth to spread. This character's whole deal is that she fights with a puppet, Death, that performs all her specials and also enhances some of her normals. Nier had some of the best neutral in the game. 214L and H are both forward traveling strikes with reasonably fast startup and good range. This move is dominant at mid-range and allows her to really put the opponent into the funhouse. Each of Nier's specials can be cancelled into each other for the sake of pressure and for combos. On hit, this was easily confirmed into big damage, and on block could be stringed into a special that left Nier plus, which is quite easy as she possesses multiple plus on block specials like 236M, 236H, 214M, and 22M, which vacuums the opponent towards her. 236M is plus 86 with 11 exclamation marks on block, while also doing a good 5 or 6% of your health through chip damage. After ending a combo that leaves the opponent high enough, 1.0 Nier was able to set up an overhead low 50-50 that 236M would let her combo off of, leading to insane damage. You combine this with her strong, low commitment neutral, and you have a character who was very oppressive. Once she got a hit, Nier would do nuclear damage and could reliably 2-touch much of the cast. A lot of her good pressure specials also do insane chip damage on block. If having such good offense wasn't enough, Nier's defense was real good too, because of Misfortune. Now, U specials cost 50 meter, so there's at least a price for that version, but H specials don't really cost anything, unless you count the longer cooldown time that heavy specials endure. H Misfortune was basically a meterless DP that led to a full, unscaled combo on hit, on a character with the best offense in the game. With everything this character does, she was overwhelmingly branded top 1 in the game by a fairly wide margin. The game got a couple of patches in that time that did tone down some of Nier's kit. All of Nier's ultimate skills in 1.0 were air unblockable, and this property was removed in 1.21. They also heavily toned down H Misfortune, removing the combo that you get post-activation and making it slower. She was still unbelievable even with these nerfs, so nothing short of a complete rework could stop her reign. And that's what they did. With Versusia's release in August 2024, the 1.50 balance patch came out and completely overhauled large portions of Nier. Some of her specials were nerfed, like 214L, which had its frame advantage on block changed from -2 to -6 and got an extra 4 frames of recovery. This was a real abusable neutral tool, so fair enough. H Misfortune also had the armor removed, completely getting rid of her meterless reversal. These changes don't even compare in scale to the Death rework. See, something I haven't brought up yet is that Nier has to spend stocks to use her specials. If she runs out of stocks, she has to wait for Death to come back and she loses access to all of her specials, while also suffering reduced damage and range on many of her buttons. In 1.0, only H and U specials consumed stocks for Nier. She could throw out her specials with basically no regard for the resource she was supposed to be managing. Sure, once you ran out of stocks, you would lose access to all your death moves, but the chances of that happening before the opponent was dead or a touch away from death were pretty low. The balance team obviously did not want her to be able to basically ignore the primary restraining factor of her offense entirely, so they made quite a few changes to it. As of 1.50, every special move in Nier's kit now has a cost. L and M specials, costless prior to the patch, now consume 1 stock, and H and U specials had their cost bumped up to 2. This extra cost applies to her special cancels, making cancels into H and U specials particularly costly now. And she loses a stock if death takes a hit. This is a massive nerf to her offense. Combos and pressure strings that previously had no discernible stock commitment can now require her to sacrifice 5 or 6 stocks, and she only has a maximum of 13. It's so easy for her to burn through stocks now. This compounds with another change that acts as a massive nerf. When 1.0 Nier burned all 13 stocks, she lost access to death for a while and would have to wait to use it again. For 1.50, this timer has been universally applied to any situation where death is sent into recall, including whenever it takes a hit. How long this particular recharge lasts is contingent upon how many stocks she has when death disappears, but even if you only spend a single stock, you're still going into the waiting room, and if you spend all 13, you're going to be there for a good while. These nerfs completely changed the way Nier must play the game in just about every way. The days of sending out 214Ls and Hs with little risk and huge reward are completely gone. Even though these moves are still strong tools, the cost for actually converting is way too high, which means she's always going to be forced to wait a very long time to get death back after any combo or string, something she really can't afford to risk due to how weak she is by herself. Since she's basically never going to have the stocks to set up 236M after a combo and convert afterward, it means her old 50-50 is also no longer really possible to set up. Nier's routing now emphasizes getting in as many hits with 5U. This button recalls death, and on hit it accelerates the rate at which the gauge fills up, which is pivotal for minimizing the time she spends deathless, but it also means her preferred routes do less damage than what she did pre-nerf. It also doesn't help that they nerfed her damage directly by adding 20% extra scaling to her specials whenever they're cancelled into each other, so even if you spend, she's not hitting as hard as she did before. The rework also severely limits Nier's pressure. If Nier spends a ton of stocks trying to open someone up and they manage to kill death on their defense by either mashing or with a brave counter, she's completely boned. Again, she loses all her specials and her buttons become substantially worse when death is gone. Basically, the insane Okizeme and damage that defined her before is now non-existent, and her new, more defensive playstyle is much weaker. Beyond the reworked mechanics, they also nerfed many other aspects of her kit to put her in check. Nier can no longer use Raging Strike if death is actually on the field, which includes when it's reeling after taking a hit. Nier could previously use Raging Strike to stall while also doing big damage if she managed to land a hit while death was reeling in 1.0. This is no longer an option for her. This nerf also removed her ability to perform very fucked up setups with Raging Strike. When blocking a Raging Strike, you can perform a brave counter to escape the ensuing guard crush. But Nier could set up her DP so that the guard point would absorb the brave counter and let her get a punish, the damage of which was bolstered by the entire sequence removing 2 brave points from the opponent. Thanks to the nerf, the player base is now free from this skullduggery. Nier's FAR 5M, 2M, and 2U all had their range reduced. These were some of Nier's best buttons, so naturally toning them down hurts her neutral quite a bit. Finally, Nier had all her U specials hit with a big universal nerf. In her prime, whenever Nier would do a U skill, death was completely invincible during the recovery. With the nerfs, death can now be hit while recovering from a U skill, which makes Nier's pressure with meter significantly weaker. This is an interesting one. A large portion of Nier's tools were unchanged. However, the way her mechanics have been reworked completely reshapes her game plan and removes a lot of the different things that made her so busted, like her explosive damage and 50-50s. Couple that with losing her meterless reversal and her buttons being worse, it's tough. She's now considered one of the weakest characters in the game due to her neutral and offense being so much tamer and the way she struggles so hard with losing so much of her kit if death is properly defended against. But given the state of the character on launch, I don't think anyone who didn't play her is complaining. She's gotten some buffs and patches after 1.50, but they haven't really changed most people's meta perception of her. For the final segment of this video, let's take a look at KOF 15. Truthfully, I started getting into this game around EVO 2024, so much of the meta prior to that passed me by, but I was definitely cognizant of some of the problem characters from earlier in the game's life, like Vanessa on launch or Geese prior to the Vice and Mature patch. One name that would never go unmentioned in discussions of 15's competitive scene was Krohnen. For a period, this guy was on everyone's shit list, and a recent conversation I had at Combo Breaker got me thinking about him. Krohnen isn't a particularly complex character, and the reasons for why he was considered busted at the peak of his dominance, funnily enough, are also extremely simple. First off, let's talk about damage, because it's probably the single most infamous thing about the character, and something he still excels at even after he fell off. Krohnen's main way of spending meter for damage is to cancel his DP into his super. You can also juggle the EX DP into the regular DP and then do the super cancel for even more damage. However, he can also cancel Infernal Prominence into the EX version of his other super, Fusion Blaster. EX Fusion Blaster can be charged and does extra damage depending on how long you charge it, but opportunities to actually charge it in combos are typically sparse, except off of DP into Infernal Prominence, which pops the opponent high enough to potentially land a full charge Fusion Blaster. DP into level 1 into charge level 2 does otherworldly damage. We're talking upwards of 70%, and even though a lot of characters in KOF 15 can resource dump for massive damage, there's two important things to take into account with Krohnen. One, these DP juggle combos are pretty easy to do and can be confirmed from a lot of different starters. Two, Krohnen is getting this damage off an invincible DP. Light DP has upper body invincibility and 4 frame startup. Heavy DP is full body invul but is a bit slower to start up at 10 frames, and EX DP combines Light's startup and Heavy's full body invul. Naturally, being able to do such damage off an anti-air DP is very strong in a game with so much hopping. EX DP in particular was an egregiously strong defensive option, because if he tagged you with it as an anti-air or god forbid on wake up as a reversal, you were at risk of losing a character to that shit at like 60%, which is nuts. Thanks to his ability to turn anyone on the roster into a headline with at least 3 bars, he was basically whatever the team game equivalent of typecasted is into being the de facto anchor character. The final character on a team in KOF is granted a max of 5 bars, and you always gain 1 bar upon losing a team member, so he was never without meter. He was an easy inclusion for any team that needed a strong third, simple to pick up and play, and able to consistently threaten huge damage. Of course, that wasn't the only thing that made him crazy strong. He had very good pressure, including a strong jump CD and some multi-hitting air normals. He has 6A, which moves forward and does a lot of guard damage while being able to stuff jumps. 3D is a slide, which becomes special cancelable when cancelled from other normals, making it a staple of his combo routing and pressure. His close D is a 17 frame overhead that knocks down and leaves him very close on hit, allowing for Oki. Since it was so active and -2 on block normally, it was very easy to have this hit meaty for plus frames. Then we have to talk about 214 B/D, the slash. B/ was safe on block, so while you could take your turn back after blocking it, Krohnen could also RPS by DPing afterwards, which would get you fucking killed for attempting to press. And if it hit, DP would combo afterwards anyway. D/ is extremely slow to start up, it's frame 33, but it's also +4 on block and hits overhead, which made it a great pressure reset. He was very sticky once he got in, and adding that in with his god damage and strong defensive options, which could lead to said god damage, he was pretty much the complete package, and it helped he was so simple. Funnily enough, a lot of the things that made him so strong were actually changes made in the game's first big patch. They buffed his hyper hop, improved a lot of his buttons with better frame data and hitboxes, upped his light DP damage, and also gave him better juggles off of light and heavy DPs. Quite the glow up. But how about the glow down? Krohnen's nerfs were dished out across 2 different patches in 2023. The first one toned down his DP and the B/. All 3 of his DPs had the ability to hit behind him removed, so no more anti-cross-up DP, along with a reduction in active frames and increased recovery frames on block and whiff. More importantly, EX DP was changed to completely remove his ability to combo off of it mid-screen. Seeing as this one was the best reversal option by far, letting him get 60% plus off of it on wake up was clearly something SNK didn't want him doing. They also reduced the super cancel window of the meterless DP, which removed some silly corner TODs he could do before. This combo that you're about to watch does not work in the current version of the game. B/ was made punishable on block, no longer allowing him to do a silly DP RPS off of it, and basically making it worthless outside of combos. This patch also nerfed 2C, which was a really strong long-ranged poke with low profile capabilities, with slower startup and a bigger hurt box. The second set of Krohnen nerfs, while not looking like much more than the first, is ultimately what did him in. Here they shot his confirms. His 2A was made slower, 4-frame startup before and 5-frame now, and the range was made smaller. On top of that, his slide was made way slower, and it travels less distance now. These two changes severely hurt him. Previously, 2A 2A 3D was a really strong string that would let him end or reset his pressure on block and confirm into combos on hit. But now, 2As will push him too far for the slide to combo unless he's literally point blank. In addition to these, D slash is no longer an overhead and can now be blocked crouching. 2B is no longer cancelable into slide, removing his ability to threaten double lows. And jump CD is now less active and has a worse hurt box. While not horrible by any means now, Krohnen definitely lost a lot of the juice that made him such a dominant anchor in his heyday. The reason he was top tier was not just his damage, but the practicality of said damage. His strong pressure, confirms, and defense all gave him some of the best reward for landing a hit in the game. With all those aspects of his game plan being made so much worse, he's a shadow of his former self, overtaken by other stronger anchors. And that's all for now. This was a fun set of characters to look at, since the variety of changes really goes to show how creative fighting game devs can be when sniping out a character they perceive to be a problem. You can nerf damage and frame data, sure, but you can also completely change how a character works to make sure they're not an issue. Hold your main close, folks, because in a matter of hours, they could be gutted like a fish, and you can't do anything except watch. Before I close this video out, I would like to give a huge shout out to the people who helped out on the script. So huge thank you to KJH Dante, Silicon and Snappy, Grisk and Luka, and Bar. Truly, I'm eternally grateful for the help. Thank you so much. Thank you all for watching this video. Have a great night, and take care. Hey everyone, it's the end of the video, so that means I get to thank my amazing, beautiful channel members. I feel like I've said this at the end of all my videos this year, but I'm sorry this took so long. 2 months I know is a pretty unacceptably long gap, especially for this video that isn't particularly long. I guess I've just been kept busy by Combo Breaker, but it's here. And hope you all enjoyed it. It was very fun. Obviously, like I said in the beginning, I've been wanting to do this video for a long time. I pretty much ended up proposing it at the end of the Glow Ups video that I did in, like, what, May 2024? So, over 2 years, but hey, it's here, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And again, I want to thank the people who helped me out on the script. But anyway, it's time to thank the channel members. Thank you. It's Old Man Han, Cammy the Killer, Jazba, Mortis, Arg Seals, Wormy, Bad Tangerine, Happy the Hap, Gundog92, Loose Chujin, Raymond ZX200, Nick Toyo, Power Level Asian, Kira the Stowaway, Sonic Frontiers is a good game, Isaac the Collector, Chandarin, Professor Bagel, Slurpee, and Sir Bot Frank. Thank you all for the support. It really does mean a lot to me. Again, I'm really sorry that this video took so long to finish and to put out, but I hope y'all enjoyed it just the same. I've got more big videos in the works, so I guess I hope you'll stay tuned, because I do have more stuff planned. So yeah, that's all I really got to say. Thank you for watching. I love you all. Have a great night. Take care.